this little session here, we are going to do a question and answer. We're going to bring our three speakers back up. They're going to sit here. I'm going to ask them some of the questions that you guys have written down, and that way we can cover a lot of bases. The other thing I want to cover is over here to my right, to your left, is a table that has brochures on it from a few different organizations that really are the tip of the spear in fighting this. In addition to, we'll all still be up here to ask any questions that maybe you feel weren't covered, or believe it or not, we've spoken at events where we've been approached by people who have been trafficked. These events aren't just about awareness. Sometimes people are restored through them as well. So speaking of restoration, we are blessed today to have a survivor of all this brokenness that you heard about and saw about here earlier. Somebody who was rescued out of that life. And I'm not going to steal any more thunder. I'm just going to have Kim come on up and have a seat with us. And Pastor Bill is going to go ahead and go through a question and answer session with her, and she'll go ahead and do her best to give us some insight on her life.
Thank you, Brian. Of course, I was going to introduce Kimberly, but you just did, so you know. Because she has survived trafficking for many years, and she is now helping other girls who have been rescued. She is also helping educate the general population on what to look for, how to address it. She's also helping law enforcement to learn the secret and hidden nuances of this thing that even they didn't know. We had her speak to 13 selected, brought to us special agents, and at the end of that time, the head one said, you need to have her on video, you need to give it to the local college to make it into a curriculum and sell it to every law enforcement agency in the United States, because what she knows, we don't know. Kimberly, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, good evening. I want to start by saying, how many of you are in here between the ages of 18 and 21? Quite a few of y'all. I know tonight you guys have heard a lot about it starts typically at the age between 12 and 14. That's the prime rate of the age of what men and women want. But I'm here tonight to show you the face of human trafficking at the age of 18 years old. So we're going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I was rescued.
What was your home life like?
So for me personally, I came from a very broken home. Typical single parent family home. There was no father present. My mom was never home, and a lot of sexual, mental, and physical abuse was going on at home. But I want to say that it does not just happen to broken young girls. I'll go into further detail later on, but a lot of the girls that I was trafficked with, the bottom girl, which is the recruiting female, she was from a suburban home area. She was a very rich girl, had everything she ever dreamed of, and she was the bottom.
So from that really rough home life, did you go into foster care, and then what happened that got you into trafficking?
Yeah, so majority of my life, because of my mother's choices, I went in and out of foster care. CPI was in my home constantly. That would, lead to tons of investigations. I also started acting out whenever I realized that cases were being closed, nothing was being done about it. I didn't know how to channel all that energy that I had, all the trauma that I was going through, and so that would land me into DJJ. And so eventually I ended up aging out of the foster care and DJJ systems around the age of 18 years old with no plan, no home to go home to, just completely released to the streets. At 18 years old, that's it, you're done. The system is done with you. State of Florida signs you off, you're an adult.
So how did you get hooked up with a trafficker?
So one day I was going inside of a local convenience store, and I came out of the store, and I literally locked eyes with what I did not know at the time was considered a Romeo pimp. A Romeo pimp is someone that will groom you, that will treat you as a girlfriend, that is very sweet and kind first starting off, as opposed to a gorilla pimp is aggressive from the get-go.
And he groomed you, and what did he tell you?
Yeah, so he groomed me, meaning for like the first 3 weeks of our relationship, he would take me to get my hair done, get my nails done, he would take me out to eat. He would do all the special things that a boyfriend would do. He eventually would then, start to tell me that he loved me, and one of the major things, and they captured on it early on, was you're beautiful, and oh, you have pretty eyes, and you're this, and you're that, and a girl that came from a broken home that never received attention or love, I ate that up. I was vulnerable. I was victimized as a young girl already, so I was an easy target for them.
And Kim, once you were taken and started being sold, much to your surprise, you heard the things we said earlier about it. Were you ever physically beat up?
Yeah, numerous times. The physical abuse that I went through, the mental abuse that I went through, I'm not going to go into details tonight because it's very, very, very gruesome. I thank God every day that I'm alive here to tell you my story. But what they are saying, it's not sugar-coated. It's very much real.
And they get the girls hooked on drugs most of the time. Do you ever get to keep any of the money that they make?
No, I never got to keep not one penny of my money. Every day I had a quota that I had to meet. If I did not meet my quota, then I would get extra beatings. And I had to get back out there, whether it, be in the clubs or if it was in, he had me on a high-paid escort site. There were several different ways that he trafficked me, but anyways, if I didn't meet my quota, I had to go back out there to meet that quota, and I still got beat either way. And you don't keep anything.
And to show how slavery really is, did you ever get to make any of your own choices about anything?
No, absolutely not. And by the time, I was trafficked for 6 years, guys. And so by the time my 6 years was over, I was literally dehumanized as a person. When I came out of trafficking, I would not look you face to face. I was trained like a dog to look at the ground. I would not hold a conversation with you. During the years of being trafficked, not that I had a loving home to go home to, but I was isolated. I was not allowed to have relationships. Even with the other girls that he was trafficking, we could not build relationships with one another. You couldn't talk to other pimps, look at other pimps. You couldn't talk to other girls in the club. Nothing. You weren't allowed to have any type of relationship. So I was completely reprogrammed after he brainwashed me and manipulated me to yield to the way that he wanted me trained. So, no, absolutely not. I mean,
And one day, when he decided he had to discipline you again, this wasn't the first time that he did this, but you escaped. How did that happen?
yeah, so actually, you fast forward just a tad bit, but to back you up a little bit, I was sold 5 different times throughout the 6 years. For various different reasons. They put a price on you. You're no longer a human, you are a product to them. What my last pimp did not know was where my first pimp picked me up from. So the last time that I was trafficked, it was in South Carolina. He had me sent out there for a week. Although I had made well over $40,000, I didn't meet my quota, and so he beat me and threw me out of a car.
Threw you out of the car. It wasn't the first time, was it?
No.
And he would expect to come back and pick you up.
He
But
always
what
did,
happened that
yeah.
time?
He always did before. This last pimp, that was the way. He was an aggressive pimp, the gorilla pimp. And he had beat me several times before in the city, threw me out, came back to get me. That's a part of the manipulation and the brainwashing that they do to you. It's a fear tactic that they use against you. But when he beat me and threw me out this time, he threw me out off of I-10, and I was from right off the I-10 quarters. So I was able to hitchhike back to my hometown and hide out. Now, I did have to go into witness protection and everything, and that's how I was kept safe and ended up going through the different various programs and everything. So that's why I'm here alive to tell you my story.
So once girls like yourself especially escape or they're rescued, were you then free?
You're never free. I carry PTSD with me, sadly. I mean, God is my healer, and He helps me every day. He gives me strength, because I walk around with PTSD, taking no medications by my own choice. But you have everyday triggers as well. I'm hypersensitive, I'm hypervigilant, meaning if I walk into a restaurant, it may be okay for one of you to go and sit with your back towards the door, and you're totally fine with that, because that's okay, you feel safe, you're good. I will never be able to do that the rest of my life. I cannot face with my back at a door. I have to know my surroundings at all times. Loud noises, gunshots, loud things, screams, anything. I mean, anything. It sets me off. And those are triggers that I'm gonna have to deal with the rest of my life. People yelling at me, people too close to me, people hovering over me. Anything is a trigger for me. So it's something that I have to be aware of, and I have to make sure that I also keep it under control, because what's gonna happen when I'm like freaking out like that by you and you're like, what's wrong with this girl? You know, so you carry that for the rest of your life, the triggers that come from that.
So you were sold from man to man, but then you were sold from trafficker to trafficker. Were you ever branded?
I was. He put his name on me because I was his product. That lets other pimps know that you are owned, and they cannot, try to not only, pick you up, but then it also lets everybody else know that you're his property. So I actually, after I got rescued, there was a team that sent me out to Miami, and they got the branding covered up for me. Because before I got that covered up, I actually had an extra 2 years after being rescued, and that was a daily reminder of what I had been through. And so it was significant to my healing journey. But yes, they do brand their girls.
And there are different levels of girls. There are street girls they use on the street, and then there are high dollar call girls taken from hotels, and that's what you were. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so they do have different levels of females. If you're mediocre, you're average, you're a track girl. A track girl is somebody that walks the streets of all the major cities. For me, I'm not a mediocre girl to them. I was very high dollar. So therefore, all the major events, Super Bowls, these big politician conferences, the big games, I mean, anything, you name it. Like any time that we have something going on, concerts, anything that you can think of that's going to bring an arena full of people, they fly us out, or they travel us out through car to each city, to all these events. So whether it was in New Orleans, Miami, Tampa, Texas, South Carolina, Vegas, Ohio, you name it, they had us there for all these events. So that's what I did. He had me in all the high-end strip clubs, and then what happened was after the strip clubs closed, then you have to go and you have to, for me, I had to work like the call escort site where, like people such as, I really hate to say this, but we're being real and honest here, law enforcement, firemen, lawyers, doctors, attorneys, people that you would not even think was calling for me to go and service them.
We talked earlier about girls dying from 4 things: the overdoses, sexually transmitted diseases, suicide, murder. Have you ever heard or witnessed girls, for example, having abortions they didn't want? We'll start with that.
Yeah, all the time. They really tried not to get the girls pregnant, meaning they would put them on Depo or whatever they had to do. And except for in cases such as where the pimp wanted to get the bottom girl pregnant, or a girl that he felt threatened was going to leave, he would deliberately get her pregnant, because that's an extra bond between the girl and him. But when it comes to, your Johns, your Tricks, whatever you want to call them, They really try to protect you from getting pregnant by them. But if you got pregnant, you were forced to have an abortion right away. I don't care, it doesn't matter. You don't get to say if you keep it or not. You don't get to say anything about your choice for your life, because it's not your life anymore.
And so did you hear about girls who had committed suicide or were murdered, died of diseases or overdoses?
Yeah, so girls came up missing all the time. Or, you would see a girl get beat really bad, or there was one night in my own case that I got beat really bad and I didn't think I was gonna make it that night, but Lord's will, I did. I've seen it happen numerous times, and the ones that have lived, like for instance, some that have STDs, they probably don't have much longer. It's really bad.
What advice would you give to this audience about the filthy internet stuff and the date rape drugs that go on?
I would just say be very cautious. I usually tell my younger crowd and their parents, monitor everything, but you guys are older, you guys monitor your own stuff, and so you just have to be really responsible. Like he said, just make sure that you're not just hooking up with somebody that you don't know on the website. You think you're going to meet that dude or that girl or whatever. Like, they're sick nowadays. Part of what I do is go into different foster cares and DJJs and DCFs and community youth. That's what I do now. And let me tell you something, we have the #1 boys home. There's only one across the states, and we have it in Florida. And there's guys in there, and there's boys in there, and it really does happen to them as well. So my suggestion for girls and guys in here is just be very cautious with your internet usage. Just make sure that you know who you're talking to. Be careful what websites you're on. Don't give any personal information across those websites. Like, if you don't know who you're talking to and you're just meeting them, do not reveal anything on those websites.
And Kim, there may be some people in here who've been sexually abused themselves and they've never gotten help and they're living with it. What would you say to them?
That's the worst kind of pain to carry. Don't carry that pain. Find one person, even if it's your best friend, if it's your mom, if it's your sister, if it's your brother, whoever you're close to, find that one person that you're close to and release it. Whether it be, say, your pastor at church, or, a sister in Christ, a brother in Christ, whoever that is. You have to release that pain. And I do recommend that after you release that, then, seek help, because when you carry something that heavy, it's like carrying poison in your soul. That's all you're going to be releasing over and over and over throughout your lifetime. So find that safe place.
Once you were rescued and got to a place where you started your own cleaning business, home cleaning, which was really cool. But then Kim got recognized for what she did, who she is, how she's progressed. What do you do for a living now?
So now I work with an organization. It's called More to Life, Inc. And so essentially it has 3 crucial parts, which is a regional advocate, a clinician, and a survivor mentor. I am their survivor mentor. So essentially is what my part is I work alongside law enforcement, meaning like these last couple raids that just happened, I was on scene to them. I pulled the rescue out. I would take the girl to her safe home. Once she was at her safe home, I was able to call my regional advocate and provide the resources that she needs to start the stability and provide the services to her that she needs for her trauma, in order for her to start healing. So I not only do rescues with law enforcement, I also go into, like I was stating earlier, the local state foster cares. I work with DCF very close, community youth, high-risk youth, and I also go into jails, prisons, you name it. So anything that has to do with the state of Florida, I'm involved in. I'm now mentoring them. I'm able to give back and use my pain in order to see another person rise up over their trauma and be able to become a victor as well.
Guys, when the girls were rescued in the massage business, being trafficked on the East Coast, and they were from China, and we got to take them somewhere. Kim wanted to be there the first night. And you know, we have a great team that does support and a lot of things. But when she walked up to them and could say, I was trafficked too, it makes all the difference in the world. What a difference. But I'll say this, and it bounces off of what Boz said earlier. You guys haven't been trafficked. She has. And yet she is now giving her life to help this fight. When she could hide, she could disappear, she could do anything else, and she's helping. Guys, you haven't been trafficked, and you can go help, and you haven't been through this trauma. So we're going to have a question and answer time, and you can ask more questions. But right now, let's thank Kim for being who she is now.
Thank you, Pastor Bill. Thank you so much, Kim. It's always a great impact to hear. Are there any other questions that haven't been submitted, some that maybe we thought of after this last session? Get them to Sebastian here. If I could have Boz and Pastor Bill and Kim come on back up and grab a seat. Do you still have your mic on? No. We do it this way because unfortunately in the past, when you hand a mic out to a crowd, sometimes people, they like to hear themselves talk, and sometimes they ask pretty inappropriate questions. So we've learned to do it this way. One of the questions here is, how important is it to you to have a healthy, stable family household? How important is it to have a healthy, stable family household?
I'm going to answer that one because it's so important. It really just piggybacks off of how I just shared my testimony with you. I didn't have that loving, supportive home. That was the first stage of my mental breakdown as a child, not having that loving, supportive home, not having the attention and the affection that I needed as a kid. That's what you need as a child. Without having that growing up, you're going to seek out that attention. Had I had a loving, supportive home, then maybe I wouldn't have fell so fast for a guy that said, oh, you're beautiful and you have pretty eyes, and then eventually within 3 weeks, I love you. That's all I wanted at 17, turning 18 years old. I just wanted to be loved. You just want to be loved. So love your children so they're not looking for love elsewhere, because somebody will tell them that they love them and feed them a box of lies to traffic them.
I'm going to pose this to Boz. How are the kids' mental state after they are rescued? Are they traumatized?
Interesting enough, every single kid, I just think this is a God, every single kid that we've rescued, when we walk into the room, whatever, they just come to us. And so that's just a God thing. As far as their trauma is concerned, yes, they have traumatic conditions that exist. We have a trauma clearing program that and again, that's just a God thing. We had a good buddy named Rick Lombard. Remember Rick? Rick passed away last year, but Rick was divinely inspired to come up with a trauma clearing method that is just off the charts. We're clearing trauma now, PTSD, in hours. I've had Navy SEALs that come to us and stuff in Afghanistan and other victims like themselves, and these are not things that you'll ever hear with a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever, or the VA or whatever it is. So what we do is we try to do some trauma clearing immediately, and if the time constraints don't allow that, we generally will have people like Kim that have been downrange, is what we call it, that can act as an advocate and transfer them over immediately because they've been down there before, so they know what the triggers are gonna be. And we'll get them in their hands, and then they can get them to a safe house, or we'll escort with someone like that to a safe house, and then people like her will take over, or like the pastor will take over, whatever it may be. But we never, I don't think we've had one victim that hasn't been traumatized to some pretty bizarre degrees. The last one we were just talking about, well, a couple of, not this one, but one prior to that, she triggered and had a pen in her hands and she threatened to kill everybody. And you know why? Because she wanted to go back to her pen. What's up with that? It's the guy that was gonna kill you, so.
It's always different. I mean, every single person responds differently to trauma. And so one person, it might last years, other people it might last weeks, but everybody handles it differently. Pastor Bill, how do we deal with the fact that the traffickers are humans with dignity too? How do we reconcile that their actions are horrific, but they are still created by God?
You know, God loves everybody. He does not love our behavior. And what he calls sin is sin. And abusing another person is that. You're supposed to love your neighbor. So you can love this guy, you can forgive this guy, but his sin was still sin, and it must be dealt with. In fact, for the preservation of society, it must be dealt with. So, you bet, human being, love them, never love the sin.
Thank you. That's a tough question, by the way. We get that often, and it is tough. Kim, was your pimp prosecuted?
So no, my pimp was not prosecuted. He still walks free to today. Half of the reason of that is the 5 pimps that trafficked me, first of all, I never had nothing but a nickname. I never knew their full name. And so therefore I don't have much to go off of. I don't know their age. I can tell you what they look like. I can tell you around about what their age is, and I can tell you a nickname, their street name. But not only that, but when I came out, like they stated to you, you know, this awareness nowadays, it's so much more than what it was. I came out almost 8 years ago. Almost 8 years ago, it was not being, you know, brought to the light like that. It was being brought that, you know, you're just a prostitute. You're just this, you're just that. So until bills started passing in 2005, and then every couple years since then, now we have the acts, the bills passed that we need to go out and prosecute these pimps. Therefore, what I'm saying is, before 2005, what are they going to charge the pimp with? What are they going to charge him with? They had to charge him with some other accusing crime because there was not a human trafficking charge. So what are they going to charge him with? Nothing. So no, to answer your question, he did not.
I'll tell you, it's awesome to hear her passion for it, isn't it? She's ready to fight, and I love that about her. I love that about her. So there's a handful of questions here that talk about kind of our safety, being in the fight. And, you know, you can go to our website and see our picture, you can see our full name. Some of us have our bios on there from our professional life. So how do we protect ourselves against the bad guys?
I think Boz is a lot safer than I am. What am I going to do, you know?
You just passed the buck. You do that? You don't do that at church, do you? No, I'm just kidding. Well, you ever watch The Blacklist? That's what we do, bad guys. You know, how do you protect yourself? I'm not sure you mean protect yourself physically, protect your family. I mean,
kind of all the above. You know, if what we're doing is we're taking property away from the bad guys, and that property, by the way, is worth about $250,000-ish a year. It's a lot of money, and we're taking that because they don't think of it as a human being. So
how do we protect ourselves?
So how do we protect ourselves from
How do
them?
you protect yourself?
We'll get into that
Yeah,
next.
we'll get into that. I think one of the things that helps protect us, one is God. Number two is, I think, like you were just saying, right? If you look at our profiles, we may have been talking about this, I'm not sure, but anybody who wants to come after us, we say bring it on. If you wanna come after us, to a bunch of Tier 1 operators, and you want a war, we'll give you a war. And I think they know that. So when they look and they see now your organization is filled with these experts, they don't really know enough about what you do know or don't know. A lot of times, traffickers, while they're horrible people, they're not always brave people. So, and you may have experienced this, Cameron, coming out is like, sometimes they'll spend the energy to go get a girl or a boy. A lot of times, they let her go if it gets too tough, because they just know they can go get somebody else. And they don't want to disturb their business model. They don't want to be too high profile. So they just like, all right, we'll just, that's not worth it to us. So for ourselves, for example, we protect ourselves. Sometimes we are armed, sometimes we're not. The tradecraft that we use at ARC is tradecraft that we've used in the special operations community. So we do as much as we can without what we call any footprint contamination. In other words, we're involved in an operation, but nobody knows we're even there. We try not to confront the trafficker. We don't have to. We monitor the trafficker. We know everywhere the trafficker generally goes. We could take them at any time, but we're not law enforcement. We're not trying to arrest somebody now. Can an American arrest somebody? Yes, it's called citizen's arrest. And let me empower you with that right there. If you see a crime in play, you can arrest somebody. We forget about that because generally law enforcement says, stay out of the way for the guys with the guns, which is true. They're trained, they're qualified. But if you're a trained American, there's nothing stopping you from making a citizen's arrest on that. I mean, if I were to be on the street and I saw a girl get picked up, you can bet your bottom dollar I'd get between her and her trafficker and save her life. And risk my own at doing that because that's a crime that's happening right now. So we do that. Sometimes we're armed. But mostly for us, it's our tradecraft. And we've sent a message, we call this back channeling. We send a message in the community, which is the pimp community, that
We have a reputation.
we have a reputation. That's a good way of doing it. And that spreads around now. And so far, it's helping us. But we try to be very, very careful about what we're doing.
So, Bill, are there counselors that we work with on a regular basis? Do we have kind of a staff of counselors that we draw upon on a regular basis?
Yes, and most every safe house isn't just a safe place to stay. They have a staff that they work with. And they'll bring in people from the outside, do everything from art therapy, which is really pretty cool, to the really psychological rapid resolution type of thing to try and get them stabilized. But every safe house has some form, for everyone we work with, of therapy that they really help the girls with. And some, I'll just say this, the 18-year-old that I was talking about traffic since she was 4, it's probably gonna take a long, long time to help her. Again, she's never been to school, never been out in society, never been normalized one day. But that's a pretty extreme case. So, but there is help in every safe house.
And secondly, what measures can we use to protect our loved ones from the threats or coercion while working against human trafficking? What are some things that we can do to avoid this happening to people that we know and love?
Well, again, I personally would say monitor everything if you have children or grandchildren or friends that they're doing on the internet as far as socializing. Because we had, well, I can't tell you about the China case, but there have been others where adult women went on the internet and there were jobs posted. We will certify you, we'll train you, we'll pay you to go through the training. Girls, adult women show up and they're trafficked. So really watch what you're doing, who you're trusting. I would make sure you have a partner in life, a girlfriend, if you're a girl, boyfriend, if you're a boy. And really an accountability partner is what we call them. And I mean somebody, the Bible says iron sharpens iron. When I was new at this, I didn't want a strong accountability partner. I wanted somebody made out of rubber or cardboard, that wasn't going to be mean to me. And that's not what you need. I have accountability partners now that will slap me down. And that's what we need, doggone it. Get somebody who will watch out for you, not let you get away with anything that could cause you harm or danger.
Thank you. Kim, now with your new position, congratulations, it's really awesome. Where are you seeing kids being stolen from, or the trafficking? And Boz, you can add to this also. Some places that were listed on here were like Target and IKEA, and people with decoys, and where are we seeing the kids being trafficked from? You mentioned foster care, you mentioned parents.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that sounds like the movie Taken or something, and that's not how that happens here in our city, our backyard, in America. 90% of the time, it is our runaways or out of foster care. Reason being is because they do not have nowhere to go. So unfortunately, those vital items that they need in life, food, shelter, things like that, just to make it every day on a daily basis, these pimps are able to target them and realize, hey, I can, groom them by saying, here, I can give you food and a shelter, knowing that young girl or young boy will buy into that because it's essential for them to live. And when they're a runaway, they just need that safe place. So I think essentially right now I'm seeing it more runaways, foster cares, the vulnerable girls and boys that come from lack of loving homes. The internet, of course. I know you guys hear about it over and over and over, but the internet, these dating websites, social media, you think that you're getting with a 21-year-old boy or whatever, or sometimes even he could be a 21-year-old boy, and he could be George Bailey, absolutely. But who's George Bailey working for? So George Bailey is working for, the trafficker. He goes, he meets the girl or the boy, takes her on a date. Little does he know the trafficker's sitting in the parking lot. He goes and gives the girl to the trafficker. His job is done. He got paid. It's over.
So some cases we've seen recently, homeless, kids from homeless, that disappeared, they're picked up. There are cases that, and this will get, I'm sure the media will eventually get this, where there is no oversight for orphanages, not exactly foster care. What happens is an orphanage will spring up someplace, 20 or 30 kids will be there. The head of the orphanage will come in and go, hey Brian, Boz got a family, and Boz is gone. And then next week, hey guys, guess what? Brian got a family, and he's gone. Little do we know is that they're being sold off. They're being trafficked, and then the orphanage closes and moves on to a different state. We've had that. And then because people are getting more aggressive, we're now working on a case where there is a park, actually in Southern California, which is known for just abductions. So people just walk up, their kid is 20 feet away, they grab them and go. And you have this happen so many times, and local law enforcement just can't do anything about it. So there are budgetary constraints, there's judiciary constraints, there's all this stuff. But I would say that if you're talking about protecting your family and your kids, all of these things that we're talking about, the internet, you know this, if you're not watching with your kids, when your kids go on the internet, they just open the doors of their house. They basically did. Anybody can get in. And so you need to be aware of that. And if you're in the malls or other places, you need to know that if your kid is not within your reach, is it possible somebody will grab him and run and jump in a car? Absolutely, and it happens all the time. We get called in on cases where my kid was grabbed, a man grabbed my kid. It was like, how? He's like, he was just 10 feet away from me, and a car pulled up, he grabbed my daughter, and they're gone. Where do they go? And sadly, I don't know where they always go. They go.
And the traffickers are getting really patient. They're getting super patient, and they work in teams. They have a person that knows how to profile you, and then they have a person that knows how to befriend you. And then they have a person that knows how to abduct you. And they work as a team. And sometimes it'll take months, even into years. They're super patient because they know exactly what comes from taking you. Travel in pairs. Be confident. Maybe you don't feeling so confident, well, walk confident. My father used to always say, keep your head up, Ryan. Walk tall. Walk tall.
One thing real quick. No matter, even if you suspect something, I don't care if you suspect something every day. Go to law enforcement, whether they want to do it or not, and be a pain in the butt. Just go, you know what, I saw this is happening on my street, and this guy's driving around. I just 2 weeks ago, Manhattan Beach, saw a guy as dirty as he can be. I know exactly what he was doing. He was just looking for a pickup, and he was in a neighborhood he wasn't supposed to be in. I went to law enforcement and I said, this is what I do. This is a picture of the car. You need to do something about this. The guy, the police officer said, what do you want us to do? It's like, go stop him. Just go stop him. You know, and I'll bet you. Open up his trunk, find out who's in the trunk. Sometimes, and legitimately, sometimes they are so inundated. And you know this, if you've ever worked in law enforcement, every time you have an incident, you gotta write a report. And it's a pain. So there's not excuses, but sometimes they just get so overwhelmed. And after you've had 30 people come knock on your door at the police department, and you go, we think this has happened, we think this has happened, and you've had one false call after another, you can understand why they think that way. But as far as you're concerned, you report it, and you report it, and you report it.
So for people like us who don't have the backgrounds that we have, but there's people that want to get involved, that we've been continuing to encourage everybody here to get involved. If they got involved, how dangerous is it for them? You want to add one thing real quick? Go ahead.
I do want to add one thing real quick, because not only is there law enforcement, but there's also a national human trafficking hotline now that people can call the hotline, and you literally can just call anonymous. You can get all the details that you have, no questions asked. Your name's not in nothing, your name's not in no reports. They don't do anything. There's no further investigation with you. So if you literally just see something and suspect something, that's okay. If it is, they're gonna get it. If it's not, it's okay. You got it off you. You know that you did what you had to do. They'll take care of the rest. So it's all anonymous. Just look it up online, human trafficking hotline.
Thank you. So how dangerous is it for this crew to get involved? Where you're living?
Okay, from our standpoint, and again, we don't knock down doors. If I charged into a door, it would break my shoulder. But we're pretty, they hand off the girls to us. They'll bring the FBI will bring people to our church in their bulletproof vests and everything right after rescue. And unfortunately, one way that some of our people are in harm's way, and we try never to allow that, but we've had girls come into an undisclosed location. Nobody knew where it was. It's across the street from the Pinellas County Jail. I mean, across the street. And the trafficker followed it there, just like Boz was telling you in his incident. He actually had one of his sergeants. And they ended up firebombing our sign out front. Well, the girl had her cell phone, and of course he tracked it directly to where we are. So you can hide, have a good hiding place, etc. But those girls can be carrying really ways to find you. And here's what I think though. The traffickers do not want to also be looked at for murder. They don't want to go to prison. They'd rather hide. They'd rather not have anybody know who they are. So I'm not that worried about it. I've been confronted by a couple people who would have done me harm, and I know this is different, but I asked each one of them if I could pray for them. And it worked. So I'd recommend that.
We're up against the clock, so we'll end with these two questions. What can we do to make sure harsher laws are passed for people who conduct human trafficking? And how can I learn more about the prevalence of trafficking in our area and get involved?
I'll just say something from the law point first. It really would be great some of you would investigate that. And maybe you're called to be an attorney, maybe you're called to be an advocate of some kind. And you can be a powerful force and a politician, so attorneys, advocates, and politicians. And you can really impact what's going on. And you're gonna have a lot of guts. There'll be advocates against you. But those three professions, if you get in on those, man, you can make a difference.
Good question. Kay Goolsby from Texas, Women's National Republican Party, asked me one day, this last year, she goes, if you run for governor of Colorado, we'll back you. And then I said, well, you're kidding me. She goes, no, we're serious. Imagine a governor with hair like this, right? And I said, she said, and then she asked me, she said, what would be the first law that you would pass? And I told her, I said, very first law I pass in the state of Colorado would be, you sexually exploit a child, you get the death penalty. That's it. That is a law, it is harsh, and I don't really care what people think about it, but we need stiffer laws as deterrents, just like we were talking about. Not that you get a misdemeanor, not that you go to jail for 5 years and you're out in 2 for good behavior, nothing like that. If you seriously want it to stop, if you seriously want to protect, at least on our end, children, people that are being trafficked, let me tell you something, God says this in the Bible, especially with children. It is better that a millstone be put around a man's neck and be thrown in the water and drowned than to ever harm one of these. Let me translate that for you out of the Hebrew. It means you die. That's what it means. Very, very simple. Guess what? That's one thing that God and I agree with everything. That's one that God and I really agree with. And I would say if any of you ever rise to power, if you get sick and tired of this happening in your state, you become a governor, a commission in your town, and make sure, we'll do what you can to make sure that justice is served properly. You heard me say it earlier, how do you murder a child without killing them? You sexually exploit them every single day, and they die the rest of their lives like that. I think that the perpetrator should basically die equally, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they pretty much covered most of it, but I would say until you get to one of those 3 positions, in the meantime, you can always feel free to reach out to a local organization. I know that Orlando area is getting ready to pretty much pass the Tampa area with the human trafficking. So it's really huge right here. So if you go to school, here, or you live in this area, there's a ton of organizations around here. Just get involved in whatever way you can, and there's tons of bills that's being passed. Get on the movement with those. Just find out what's local in your area, and just get involved in whatever way that looks like, and however God's leading you in your heart. Because there is a position for each one of us. There's a place. There's something that God has for each of us to do. It's just asking Him, what is your calling, and following it, saying yes.
Can I say one quick thing? This is really important. When you do that, and she's exactly right, but I want you to do something. I want you to make sure you vet the NGOs that you become a part of. One of the problems we're having in the United States right now is that we have a lot of people that are making money off of the situation, the same way pimps are. They're starting organizations for awareness. They're getting big grants, they're getting big money, they're making in excess of $15 million a year. And when you actually find out what they're doing, you find out they're paying big salaries and they're not doing what they're saying they're doing. And we run into this constantly because we're always vetting. We're picking up somebody and going, hey, wait a minute, you say you have 20 beds there, but what do you mean you can't take anybody? You only have 2 beds. Wait a minute, because we go there and we find out. So make sure that you become a part of an organization that's credible and you know exactly what they're doing. Even when you give money to an organization, ask where the money's going. How's it being used? You show me. How many people did you get out of trafficking just this month? And if they're making $15 million and they're getting 1 girl out of trafficking per month, something's wrong with that picture. Does that make sense? Yeah. And they're doing the same thing. They're just pimping on the other end is all they're doing.
Well, thank you guys so much for giving us this opportunity. I know it was a long night, but it was a lot of information, and it's important to us for you to hear it, because we really, really need the help. There's a lot of work, and there's very few people willing to do it. Get involved. There's brochures up here. We're going to stick around a little longer. If you have any questions, we're happy to do it. And if you need to speak to Kim or anybody privately about anything, we're happy to do it. We have a room across the hall that we can talk to you privately. But thank you again so much. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Brother Adam.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Brian, and all you guys for coming up and being brave and just sharing your stories, your experience, and bringing awareness to our student body. If everyone could just give another round of applause. I would just like to end with a prayer. So in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for this night. Lord, we thank you for Brian and all the speakers for coming up and just sharing what they have. Lord, we ask you to just bless all these people, all those that have attended today, that you have stirred a fire in our hearts to continue to fight this war that has been brought into our land, Lord, that we may start something new and to protect our children and protect those that have been victimized, Lord. In your name we pray, amen. Like Brian said, we have bush doors down on the table. These guys are, and they're open to talk to y'all. So if you guys feel, if you have personal questions to ask them, just please come up and just talk to them. Thank you guys for coming out. Good night.